So, hello everybody, and welcome to the Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. My name is Matthew, and I'm joined today by Mr. Rolf Adam, who is the CEO of the Implico Group. Is that right, Rolf?
That is right. Thanks for having me, Matt.
And thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today, Rolf. Before we get started, can you tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about the Implico Group?
Sure. So Implico is an IT company, a software company that has been around for 40 years. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary this last Friday. And Implico is an expert on the supply chain for the energy and natural resources industries. We provide software for the midstream and downstream part of the businesses, and happy to get into more detail there. So if you look at any value chain, it can be oil and gas, it can be chemicals, it can be agriculture, it doesn't really matter. It's always the supply chain separated out into three parts. It's upstream, where whatever it is that you're dealing with comes out of the ground. So the farmer grows crops. For our oil and gas customers, they drill for oil and they drill for gas. For the chemicals companies, the mining companies, they mine for chemicals, the raw materials. And then, so that's upstream. And then there's midstream, and this is where the processing happens. And that could be agriculture processing, fermenting, or in our case, it's refining and some storage of the refined products. And then there's the downstream part of the value chain where the produce is being distributed to the consumers. Now, what we focus on is the midstream and the downstream part of the supply chain for liquid goods. And we have developed software that helps tank terminal operators, because goods need to be stored, operate their tank terminals. And again, that could be a food company having to store liquids like alcohol or milk, or could be an oil and gas company that needs to store oil. And then we've developed software on the downstream part of the business, where then the liquid materials are being distributed, in our case, oftentimes to gas stations, but also then chemical plants or other end consumers.
Okay, interesting. So this software and that you work with and the technology you've brought into place, it helps to streamline these processes. Is it who's the major benefiter here? The customer, the consumer, the producers? Who's winning what out of this?
The logistics operators in the supply chain. It's basically like the operations part of any ERP system, with a industry focus on that part of the industry. So let's say you're a big company like Daimler or Glaxo, then you be using SAP to run your finance system and your operations system and your asset management and your warehousing. And in our industry, given that it's a very specialized industry, they would be using our software to run their operations. And in our case, and I know it sounds simple, it is oil or chemicals going into tanks, being stored, and then being let out of the tanks and distributed into trucks or railroad cars. And the whole process sounds easy on the surface, in, storage, out. But if you look under the hood, the customs implications, the tax implications, the regulatory and compliance implications are quite demanding on our customers. It takes a lot of special expertise to build a system that then enables our customers to run their processes smoothly and legally and tax-wise, customs-wise correct.
Wow. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot happening behind the scenes that, we're not always aware of. And tell me,
Exactly.
40 years, you say you celebrated your 40th anniversary. That's a long time. What do you attribute the company's success to? What has kept you and your company in the game for so long?
I think it's two ingredients. One is the industry expertise that we have in that niche market. And clearly, by just listening to me, it sounds very niche-y, and it is very niche-y. That's that expertise that we have in that space. I think that's outstanding. It's a very small part But I always keep telling our staff, we are the big goldfish in that small pond, because there's no other company that has that industry expertise that we have. So that's one ingredient. And the other ingredient is really the loyalty and the commitment of our team. I've never worked in a space, the company, where we have so many people that have been in business almost as long as the company is in existence. Just the pure number of people that are still with us from day one or year two that we have on board is unbelievable. We are about 220 people strong. We still have one of the original founders on board.
Wow.
Although it's owned by private equity, so there has been some of management and ownership transition happened a few years back. We still have one of the original founders on board, and we probably have about 10 people on board that date back to the year when Implico was originally founded. And we have an amazing number of people that have been with us for 20, 25, 30 years. That is just unbelievable. And the commitment and the knowledge base that this group of people has, outstanding. I've never experienced anything like it.
That's brilliant. It's quite interesting to hear something like that these days, as you're probably well aware. What do you boil that down to? What do you think it is that keeps the people so loyal and keeps them so close to the company, especially with the change of owners and that? Usually, it ruffles a few feathers. We start changing owners, we start changing the way we do business, and people don't like it and they don't like change. But to hear that people have stuck around through these changes for so long, what do you boil that down to?
Technically, niche space, but also a space where we've always been at the forefront of the industry evolution. I think we consider ourselves what many aspire to be, thought leaders for that industry. We've always been not only a few steps, but a few years ahead of the curve. What's happening in that industry, where do they need to involve their industry, their operations too? So that's one. I think it's also really, really strong success in hiring for the right profile, for the right people, that we have people on board that share our vision, that share our commitment, and always had in terms of responsibility for our customers. Oftentimes, let's say Excel, if you can't open up Excel, it's unfortunate, but typically most businesses do get by. If our software were to fail, you would actually have hundreds of trucks queuing up. You'd actually have gas stations running out of petrol. You'd have refineries that couldn't produce anymore, literally from the first hour of malfunction of our software. And I think that level of commitment, that level of responsibility, that's what keeps our people excited, because the well-being of a lot of human beings around the globe really depends on our software functioning. That's exciting.
That is incredible. Wow. So yeah, it could. I was going to make a joke about third world countries there, but I hear what you're saying. So a lot of responsibility coming in, managing the software, keeping everything up to date, and that then as an employee, it's quite an awesome thing to have that. What I'm doing today, it actually makes a difference. When I drive past the filling station and there's a bunch of cars and they're all getting their fuel and things are operating, I know that I was part of this functionality, and I suppose there's a satisfaction that comes from that. Rolf, can I take a step back? Can we talk about your personal journey a little bit, getting to Implico? Where did you start off? Can we maybe go back to university? What was that like for you? Did you know what you wanted to do? Where were you heading in the beginning?
Background is pure business education. I started out in Germany. At the time, I was born and raised in West Germany. At the time, we still had West and East Germany. And then after I'd finished my high school diploma, by the way, I've spent a year in the US, living on a farm, going to a high school, milking cows every evening. So that was the first lesson. Don't be a farmer. It can be very rewarding, but only if you do it as a hobby. If you have to make a living being a farmer, that is really a tough life. Typical Midwest American dairy farmer, not pleasant. But that was exciting experience. And then I finished. Yeah, only if the machinery works. So we had to milk the cows by hand, 2 occasions. yeah, again, that is a very different experience. A very different experience. So I'd come back to Germany, finished my high school diploma here, and that was the time with the spirit of young men go east, which I did, and spent a couple of years in Jena, in East Germany. Well, at that time it wasn't East Germany anymore, but in the former eastern part. And then I went down to Munich, a small university close by there, completed my studies there, went to the US and got an MBA. And as part of the journey, I spent 6 months in management consulting with Ronald Berger. And that was the point in time, but basically my epiphany. Once I'm done with my studies, I want to be a management consultant. Yep. And I've done that for 12 years, spent 2 years with A.T. Kearney, and then a better part of 10 years with Booz Allen Hamilton at the time. It's now Booz Allen, and then it Strategy and so it evolved. And mostly focusing on the energy industry. I found that very exciting. Sort of what makes this world or us as people go around, and how do we sustain our lifestyle? And then was one of the first thought leaders around the energy transition and the digitization of the energy industry. Smart grid, came across smart meters, and then the grid automation and so on. And after a while, it became clear that the lifestyle of a management consultant, at the time we were on the road 5 days, 6 days a week, working typically 90, 100 hours a week, that wasn't sustainable. I started having a family, and that was the time when Cisco actually knocked and was saying, well, we want to build out the smart grid sales team, a business development team. We understand, or John Chambers at the time, with his foresight, he understood that the industrial IoT would be so much bigger than the internet. And given that I was one of the few people in Europe who really understood the energy transition and smart grid, they asked me if I wanted to join Cisco and join that company and build up the team, which I did for 5 years. And after that, I was running a value-added reseller service and cloud business for 5 years inside. It's one of the very large value-added resellers, built their cloud business. Then I joined Hitachi and ran their Microsoft Dynamics, the ERP business in Central Europe. And then I started I did join Implico about a year ago, and I've been on that journey all along. I think probably was different in my profile from the typical corporate and management role is that I've always worked for the past 15 years with private equity and venture companies as an advisor. So I understand that side of the business, which helps in my day-to-day job as I know how my shareholders think and what they expect from me. And I've always been an avid sort of business angel investor on the venture space. I've set up 2 companies in the past. One failed, one was a success. And I enjoy working with other business angels and startup teams, mostly in the SaaS space, but also the hardware space, a bit of service business. And that's sort of 360 on how I get to where I am today.
So I think that's quite cool. So you've always had you've always had a sort of a chain, with the energy industry. So you've always had like a common denominator, and you've done a lot of different things and learned a lot about different aspects of the market. Now you get to utilize all of that experience. What was one of the things maybe that you learned that about yourself, maybe that surprised you? Was there any, like a personal journey? You did mention that your priorities changed when you had a family. And tell us a little bit about that change and your priorities, what was important to you. How did you handle that transition?
That's an interesting aspect. So the transition didn't happen overnight. I think once you have children, clearly your perspective on life changes. Then you have your parents die. Again, your perspective on life changes. And you understand that priorities over time need to be different. And for me, that was actually quite a difficult journey, because if you join, specifically at the time, if you join a classic management and strategy consulting company, it's almost like, a secret society in the way that you're either in or you're out. And if you're in, you need to be fully committed and dedicated to the journey, which means that you're working the 80, 90, 100-hour weeks over and over again, year after year. And after a while, you're so sucked and pulled into the system that you don't realize that there's a world out there, because your life basically starts Monday morning, you board a flight, and then you go home Friday night or Saturday morning. And with the Blackberries we had at the time, and then the iPhones or smartphones and the internet, even on the weekend and on holidays, sort of you're just constantly online and constantly connected to the team. And that's great, because basically that's your environment. That's the golden cage that you're part of. You're well paid. It's exciting. You have early on access to very senior people on clients' businesses, and that's the thrill of it. And I think the first time it really dawned on me that there's a world outside that I'm not part of was when my wife and I, we took a 4-month break and did an around the world tour. And basically disconnected. At the time it was easy, because basically we didn't really have emails. We simply disconnected and went on a backpack tour around the world for 4 months. And getting back, I still remember I had to, at the time we were living in Vienna, I had to fly via Munich, and I was sitting, being a frequent traveler, sitting in the airline lounge Friday night. It was my last leg of that 4 months, and listening to the meaningless conversations about hotel clubs and mileage clubs and flights and so on. And I realized, wow, this is the world that you've left behind. That's the world that actually you need to get back into. How do you deal with that? And though a thought process started that you need to spend more time reflecting on what's happening in the world around you, around myself, and then thinking about how can I align what's happening outside and what's happening on the family side that we then started, and what's happening on job-wise. In the end, I think it makes you somewhat more relaxed, more reflected on what's really important, and probably a better, at the time, consultant, now in my job, a better manager, if you understand that most people actually do want to balance family life and work life. And there's a work-life balance, which in the consulting days, there wasn't a work-life balance. There was just work. And life just built the basis for work.
So that, I really like that. So that 4 months break, I couldn't imagine taking one now, but I mean, the thought is very, very appealing. To totally disconnect, switch everything off, and go and get some fresh perspective. And so that's obviously changed a lot about the way that you think and the way that you handle things. Do you now, at the moment, do you find like you've got it worked out? How much time you spend at work, how much you're spending with the family? Are you in a good space there?
Yes, absolutely. Running a company, and it's called the Implico Group, although the sort of the international part is still smallish. We do have an operation in the US. We serve customers on a global scale, and we have a private equity ownership, which is always a bit stressful. I mean, in the end, it's very simple business metrics, how to be successful in a private equity owned environment that is demanding. I think I've found a balance for myself for the last few years, and understand there are times where that balance is tilted to the negative, and then there are times that you just need to make space for everything else, give back to your family, the community, whatever is important to yourself. And so if I look at this year, for example, we had a very, very stressful H1, and then summer period, mid of June, July, August, it was a bit more relaxed. So customers going on holidays, teams going on holidays, things are cooling down, and that's the time when you need to sort of, whenever you need it, to take time off. And sometimes take a Monday morning off or Friday afternoon off. Make sure that you find your balance. And then looking forward to the second half of the year, basically starting 2 weeks ago, I know it's going to be full blast ahead until we hit Christmas with a lot of international travel, customer meetings, and the team meetings. And that's just the sort of the natural flow of things over the year. And that's okay. So that's okay with the family, because they know that there are times where I'm basically, at least during the week, hard to reach and hard to get hold of. I'm traveling a lot. And then there are other times where I'm more at home and more relaxed, and we balance it for ourselves. That's what I tell our team. I'm really in software business, implementing heavy software for customer side. You've always that go live phase when finally you flip the switch and software needs to run and everybody wants to see it running smoothly. That's very demanding 2 weeks period for our team, where they work not day and night, but they work long hours, they work weekends. And then I always push them, like, you have to, once it's live, you have to take some time off. And I don't even want to know about it. Just take Friday off, take Monday off, whatever it takes to recharge and make sure that you do this in your own pace and at your own time. They don't need to take holidays for it. They simply take back what they've sort of built up in the weeks before that go live. And I think that's at least from my perspective, a work-life balance lifestyle that it can work for most people. I mean, clearly you always have people that sort of need formal permission. Is it okay if I take another couple of days off? Absolutely fine. I understand that. But in our industry, where we are working with a lot of very mature people, people that have been around the block for a long time, they have the experience and the sort of an operating mode where they can actually adjust and live in that sort of model and live well.
While we're talking about that, while we're on that sort of vein, the team, the company, everything seems to be sort of stable in that. What are we looking at in the for the future? What are we looking at for the future? Is there anything in the immediate that we can look out for, or are you just going to follow the same sort of working process moving forward?
So Implico has been around, as I said, for 40 years. Very much as a European organization with customers in the MENA region, some customers in South America, some customers in the US. The next phase of our development geographically will be much more international. There are a lot of untapped markets for us in Asia, in Australia. The whole APAC region is very exciting, given that while the complexity of the business here stays as it is, probably oil and petrol consumption will go down in Central Europe over the next few years. So that's one thing, geographic expansion. Then the whole notion around cloudification and further digitization of our customers is clearly keeping us up at night. We come from a world that is very, very much client service centric, very legacy software development approach. Now moving forward, cloud, even in an industry that is as conservative as energy, natural resources, needs to be the dominant driver for technology investments. And then the whole notion around the industrial IoT, if you look at the tank terminal or refinery, it's very basic automation today. And there's a lot of backlog in terms of further automating those facilities, given that aging workforce is a key driver there. If you look at the young people today, nobody wants to be a refinery operator or a tank terminal operator. They want to be media designers and so on. So the whole notion around aging workforce really is hitting our customers hard. They need to find a way to keep the lights on. That's more digital and more automation. So that's good for us. Also, from a regulatory perspective, the whole notion about biofuels and the synthetic fuels, that's driving up complexity of the operation. And even as consumption is going down, with the electric vehicles, absolutely fine. But the consumption is going down, but complexity of the business of our customers is going up. So they need to further digitize to accommodate the increased complexity in their business. And this is what we are focusing on in our product development for the coming years.
Wow, so that's interesting that you brought that up. And I had a chat with someone about that recently, talking about all the different ways, all the different things we can make fuel out of these days. And, these biodiesels and eco-fuels, and everybody's refining and gathering cast-off products to make fuels to run things. And I can imagine, depending on where it's been made, what it's been made out of, what rating it's got, and how you distribute it and contain it and store it and supply it to, it must be a nightmare at times.
It is. I mean, for us, it's straightforward. We just need to build it in our software. But for the operators of tank terminal, that really, really is demanding, because they have customers that they need to address. They have literally new businesses. They are active than our customers in carbon capture and storage. That means different regulatory environments, also different physical risk environments. it's easy to sit behind the desk and talk about software, but our customers, their operators, they are in very dangerous environments, day in, day out, and they're risking hopefully not risking their lives, but there's also always that personal risk they are dealing with if something goes wrong, that they are doing on behalf of literally us, our society. They try to keep the lights on here, and I think that's oftentimes not really appreciated by the public.
I know 100%. I agree with you there. And these are things that as an end user, we hardly think about what it actually takes to get that fuel into your vehicle at the end of the day, what people have gone through and what they've had to put up with to ensure that we can do it safely and stand at the tank and put it in the car and drive away and not even think twice about where it came from or if it's going to blow my car up, or I don't, those aren't even things that cross my mind. That's what got to me. And so I can imagine the behind the scenes stuff is complex, and you've got human error to deal with as well. So if all your stuff's working, at least that reduces some of the risk. And then the human error, that's on a different side, but you can't have your product being faulty and have the human error problem on top.
Exactly. And this is also part of the next generation evolution of our product lines. How can we build in more analytics and artificial intelligence to make sure that we prevent at least partly human error, or we create a better understanding of what could go wrong and how to prevent it to make the environment safer for the operators, for our customers, in the end, also ourselves.
So, Rolf, I know you got things to do. I just wanted to ask you, I've got a question that I ask everybody. We've heard a bit about your journey, how you learned about yourself, your company, the pressures, what's happening in the industry and the environment. There's a lot of moving parts over there. And what I like to ask everybody at the end of one of these is for a bit of inspiration, okay? So a famous quote, or as I say, if we have to write something on your bedroom wall, okay? You wake up every day and you have to read the words that are written on your bedroom wall. What do they say?
Yeah, well, so that would be, not living on the edge is wasting space.
Not living on the edge is wasted space. I like that. That's very, very cool. I like that. And tell me, before we log off, is there anything you would like to share with our viewers and our listeners that we may have missed?
I think one call out would be that while everyone is sort of very concerned about the environment, which I am too, absolutely, I think we tend to neglect, at least from a European perspective, the rest of the world is doing better there, that we all love our lifestyles, and our lifestyles depend to some extent on things working. And oftentimes, I think the changes that we see to the way the world operates, specifically on the energy side, are not thought through to the extent that they are not interrupting the way the world runs. And I think we would be well suited to, or well advised to sometimes take a step back and then reflect properly on what's happening, and then come up with a proper plan of how can we make sure that ourselves, our children, and our children's children have a world that's worthwhile living in, and how do we get there rather than making radical changes that are expensive and we regret, like the German exit of nuclear. I think over time, getting out of nuclear is probably a wise decision. Did we have to make the decision just because we had Fukushima as an incident and then rush through it, costing a lot of companies and us as a society not only a lot of money, but also creating a lot of extra CO2? Doesn't make any sense. At least to me, it does make sense. And I think as we make those fundamental changes to our society that I'm all in favor of, we need to make sure that we do this thought through, step by step, rather than rush through things. I think that would be the call out to anyone sort of slightly negative, with a negative sentiment towards the energy industry, that it's an industry that relies on very heavy infrastructure that's expensive to build, expensive to maintain, and we can't make changes overnight.
100%. Do you think maybe we're rushing into things headlong, thinking about stopping the problem now. They're not thinking about what is going to happen to us later on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and there are so many examples of that. The nuclear exit in Germany was one. I'm very much in favor of wind energy. It makes perfect sense, but we haven't thought through what we do with the windmills once they have reached their end of life. And then we have carbon fiber wings that need to be, in the end, landfilled. We don't have an answer what to do with it right now. And those sort of things, I think, I only wish we would think it through more profoundly and have a holistic answer, because the risk I see is that in 40 years' time, people are looking back saying, you know what, actually, this society, this generation did nothing else or nothing different with wind than the generation before with nuclear. They gave us a lot of base burden with the carbon fiber wings that were produced that made sense at the time, and it was clean energy. But now we are stuck with millions of tons of carbon fiber that we don't know how to deal with.
How to dispose of it, absolutely. And I think that on par with the disposal of the electric vehicles' batteries. And I'm speaking for myself here and one or two other people that I've encountered. But when the electric vehicle motion came out, there was a big thing. Everyone said, "Oh, wonderful! We're not going to be burning fuel, and it's great." And it was only a few years later, after the hype sort of died down, that I started hearing things about battery disposal and the running costs and the maintenance costs and the cost of producing the extra electricity. And I was caught up, like I think most people were, and I was like, "Oh, cool, electric cars." And then when all this information started coming out, and they were saying, "Well, the batteries are becoming a problem, and the maintenance of the vehicles and the production of the parts for these vehicles and so on and so on." And they started doing these calculations. It turned out that what we were sold and what was happening were not exactly transparent. And yes, it might be better in the long run.
Right.
We're burning less fuel, but it's not as good as what was sold to us in the beginning.
Correct. And I think that's a prime example. Another prime example of that. So maybe it's LPG or it's hydrogen power, and we need to think it through. And to some extent, it's absolutely wonderful that we have the innovation of an electric vehicle. I think for some of the startups like Tesla have done to the world, created here, generated, that is amazing, truly amazing.
Absolutely.
From the innovation perspective. And they've driven a debated conversation that is absolutely right. Is EV or REV the better transportation mode, or do we go for H2? We need to figure that out, but we need to figure it out and give ourselves time to actually do that. Because clearly the climate crisis isn't happening overnight. It's a lengthy process, and we need to make sure that we actually stop it, but we stop it with the right measures.
Yes, absolutely. No, I agree with you. Rolf, I just want to say thanks. I know we got things to do. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your insights and sharing your story with us. We wish you all the best for the future. Stay in touch, and we'll definitely keep our eye on you and follow your progress.
Thanks, Pat. It's been a pleasure being here. All the best.